Oh, the green screen. A tool of endless possibilities. But it wasn't always around. You see, if we went back in time, before the green screen, we had projections.
That's right, the rear projection effect. Simply stand in front of a screen while a projector from behind casts a reversed image. And look at this! It's as if you're really there. You could casually be driving a car or drifting down a river. It's a groundbreaking piece of technology with unlimited possibilities.
But looking back on old projections now, they haven't really aged well, have they? I'm going to take you on a journey on how projections have or haven't progressed. I've chosen to do the James Bond series. Why? Firstly, I'm British, and secondly, after watching recaps of Bond films from Dutch Bond Fan, I've started to re-watch the films again. So, with that being said, let's begin. Dr. No. This is the bare minimum, but it's understandable. Steadicams weren't invented until 1975, so we have a while to go. From Russia with Love. Not much has really changed. They did, however, try some attempt to excuse the dodgy projections on the train. The night backdrop shakes up and down slightly, but one could argue that the train was a bit more rickety. Some of the shots here actually do shake subtly, making the backdrop shake more convincing and understandable. I applaud the effort, but then there's some shots that just don't shake at all. The ending really annoys me. This is clearly projected, but could this not been filmed properly on location? I understand if they didn't get film permits, but the end result is obvious. The sunlight on the projected footage doesn't seem to match up with the supposed sunlight on the characters. I'd also say the projected footage is a bit too blurry, but one could argue it's out of focus because we're focusing on the hand, but there's just no depth to this image. According to IMDb, most of the film was shot on location and kept rear projection to a minimum. Thank God that was the case if we got scenes like this. Apparently in the Miami scenes there was lots of rear projection done. You wouldn't think so because they're static shots, but when you pause at points in the film, you can make it out. For example, in this shot here, if you look closely at the extras by the pool, sunlight is coming in on the left, creating a shadow on the right, whereas for Bond, he's more lit on the right side of his face while his left side is shaded. I think the light should have had a yellowy tint so Bond could match the sunlight colour in the projection. The Switzerland car scenes are a mishmash. We get one shot of Tilly driving, which looks properly filmed due to the convincing accurate lighting. Then we get shots of Bond, which are not properly filmed. I just see the tiniest green tint on Bond. I don't think I'm colorblind. Also, the lighting inside seems a bit dull considering the clear skies outside. The wheel gadget projection is obvious, but considering the angles needed for the right projection, I applaud the effort. My god, did they shoot this at night? A bit dark, don't you think? The flying scenes are really bad. Are planes supposed to shake that much in real life? Also, on an unrelated note, bloody hell, Sean. I know it's part of the mission, but nothing else noteworthy afterwards.
And he strikes like thunderbolt.
It feels like some of the projections aren't angled correct. Why is this angled down? Is she doing a wheelie in a car? The only notable projection of discussion is the final front view of the boat. Bond activates the boost on the boat, and the boat apparently goes twice the speed, but so does the projection footage, as well as the footage outside of the boat. Are you kidding me?
You'll never catch me, Crabs. Not when I shift into maximum overdrive. Hi-ya!
So we start on an and we end on an Fair enough.
You only live twice.
Driving projections have stabilised a tiny bit, albeit we are on some good quality road. There's some aerial scenes that require projections, and they're pretty good. Stable, not ridiculously out of focus. Light between foreground and background are fairly close, and the little Nelly shakes a little bit, so it's not static, because that would have broke the illusion pretty badly. The only other scene to talk about is when Bond and Kissy escape on a raft, and it's not the projection I have a problem with, it's just the fact that they're both somewhat dry despite swimming to a raft. I'd say You Only Live Twice is Sean Connery's most impressive film, from a projections perspective. On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Snow. This is the worst terrain to get projection footage for. Coincidentally, a lot of the worst footage is left to Blofeld and his men. Bond got off pretty lucky with quicker cuts. Daytime skiing was a bit better. If the projection and the camera is slightly low angled, it helps the illusion a little bit better. Some of these shots are actually decent. The bobsleigh chase is actually not as bad as I predicted. Definitely not as shaky as I would have thought. Yes, it's obvious, but remember, snowy environments are the worst to film on, so the bar is low to begin with. This will be a recurring problem throughout this video.
Diamonds are forever, forever, forever.
Surprisingly, there isn't much here. Probably the biggest scene for potential projections is the car chase in Vegas. Half of the shots are projected. A little bit of shake here and there, the same quality of You Only Live Twice, but then the other half are actually done for real. Wait, so they're actually letting the actors drive? What? Also, on an unrelated note...
Bitch.
Bloody hell, Sean! I mean, I know it's part of the mission, but...
Anyways, maybe they could start using less projections in later Bond films. But then the Roger Moore era arrived.
Live and let die.
Driving is very smooth now. Everything is done very well here, however, it wasn't particularly risky. The only notable one is on the boat in the evening, probably because it's a very stable boat. It probably would have been better if the sea projection was stable and the boat was ricketing, not the other way around. Also, the sunset is that way, so what is this light coming from this way?
The man with the golden gun.
Something just doesn't seem right. I don't think the lighting in the car matches the outside. Flying scenes are fine. I'm just a bit on the fence with this one. The Spy Who Loved Me.
Nobody does it better.
Uh-oh. Snow. Jeez. There's one projection shot I'll allow, and it's this little shot here where he's going for the goggles. The reason I allow this is because even though the projection shakes a bit, so does Bond. I'm sure this was blind luck, but it sort of works. But in the other projections, Moore is just too still for the projection. Driving is okay. Seems a bit desaturated, stable enough at times. There's also an error in synchronization. You see, this projection shows the car turning right, but Bond turns the steering wheel right a little too late. The train scenes are probably the best. I don't think the projection shakes nor the train, but the camera does. This is probably the best way they could have done this. Could they have not filmed this properly? It's not particularly dangerous. Again, with the submarine, could they have not just done this properly? I mean, you had a submarine earlier in the film. Is renting a submarine too expensive or something?
Just like the Moonraker goes.
You know, for a Bond film with groundbreaking special effects, the projections here are pretty disappointing. The skydive is just not convincing, from actors being a bit too still, to tinted colours, to overly horizontal flying. Who do they think they are, Superman? Jaws is blatantly standing up here. I don't really know how you could film skydiving close-ups without properly skydiving, so I went to the future and looked at skydiving scenes from Point Break. Turns out for close-ups, they had crane rigs with telescopic arms that would carry each actor. They probably didn't have the arms back in '79. The cable car scene is understandably projected, because the actor who played Jaws actually had a fear of heights. But there is an upside. This is lit quite well. The lighting here matches the projected scene's light pretty much perfectly. This is the best projection in the film. Then there's the boat scene, and it's bad. Even though it's sunny, the projection is desaturated as if it was cloudy. It's a bit too blurry as well. The glider is just a piss take. Perhaps I don't know a thing about glider aerodynamics, but how could one move to his left while he's gliding directly at us?
Wait, what? Wait, hold on, just stop for a minute, sorry. I just had to get my head around that one. I could just see it now. just some guy with a shoulder-mounted camera or something like that, maybe just handheld, and he's just looking up to the trees and just going. This projection really wasn't needed.
Anyway, Bond goes into space after that, where it's all impressive.
For your eyes only can see me through the night.
The opening scene has promise. There's a lot of potentially difficult scenes to pull off, but they turned out quite okay. Was this chase scene in the 2CV projected, or was it done properly most of the time? Because if it was really good. I mean, there's definitely one where the 2CV gets hit from behind. Everything seems fine, but there's one point in the film that's so flawed, I consider it one of the worst projections in Roger Moore's collection. And what do you know? It's in snow! There is some unprojected close-ups of Bond, which makes you think, whoa, is that really Roger Moore? Is he actually doing his own stunts? One tiny projection before a jump, but that's not the worst thing. The worst thing is the bobsleigh track. So you get a long take of the bobsleigh crew looking at Bond, and then...
What the fuck? Damn it!
Not only is the projection shaking, but there's a green tint to it as well. On Her Majesty's Secret Service was better than this.
You ass!
You know that feeling you get when you're so immersed in a film that you forget the reality you're in? Well, that projection was so bad that it kicked me out of the immersion.
Even though Bond dangling from a cliff has static projections, I'm glad it's not too blurry, desaturated, or tinted.
Overall, I think things were getting better. I know some people say one spoiled apple ruins a bunch, but I think the rest of the projections were good enough.
Octopussy. For a film as comedic as Octopussy, you'd think this film would have some of the most ridiculous projections. Well, I can tell you right now that the projections in this film are actually really good. I don't think I have any complaints here. I honestly believe that close-ups of the Acrostar jet aren't projections, but rather the camera was just angled up to the sky, which would have solved multiple problems in the earlier years. This is a projection, but at least it's not too blurry. Neither is this. Are these projected too? Because it doesn't look it. The fight on top of the train could have easily been terribly executed, but it's actually decent. It's surprisingly still and has a clear image. What makes this even more top-notch is the additional effects that accompany this shot, giving this fake location some depth and more believability, such as a tree passing by in front of the main image, or how about little bits of cloud. Also, the final plane scene is also executed really well. Perhaps this projection is a little blue tinted, but I let it off. Seriously though, whoever did projections here should get a raise. From a projection perspective, this is Roger Moore's best film.
Never say never again.
There isn't any, to my knowledge.
Meeting you with a view to a kill.
Uh-oh. Snow. There's only one projection here and it's not good. Just some fancy lights flashing upon Bond while pretending to struggle in front of a shaky projection screen. There's a scene where we see Bond hanging from a ladder atop a fire truck, and we're introduced to more shaky driving projections. I thought we were past this. It's far from the worst, but I thought it could have been a bit more stable. The last thing I'll touch on is the blimp and the ending. Bond hanging on the rope is fine, but the front shot? Why is this shaking? I thought aerial projections were easy. The projections on the bridge are great. I didn't expect them to be over-focused, but at least they're the right colour. If you want to be real nitpicky, you could ask why the bottom of the bridge is at one angle while the upper part is in a slightly different angle and not parallel. Wait, it moved? When was the last maintenance check? Because Timothy Dalton does a lot of his own stunts, there wasn't much need for projections. Driving was perfect. The only one that was poor was the front projection inside the cargo plane in Afghanistan. It's shaking a bit, but it is the right colour. You know what, it's Timothy Dalton, I'm not even going to say bloody hell to him. There's so little of it in this film, yet there's so much stunt work. Here's an example of what I mean. The barefoot water skiing was done by a stuntman, but anytime there was a close-up, Dalton was put on a special rig. So now we're getting to a time where rear-end projections are becoming obsolete. But then they go all in at the end in Sanchez's car, and it's not particularly good. Shaky with some blue tint. Obviously one could argue that the tint comes from the glass, but how can one argue about the shaking? We're not off-road, and the road itself doesn't look too bad.
Goldeneye, I found his weakness.
That's a nice touch. What a soothing projection screen.
That's not a projection screen!
That's right, the Bond franchise properly entered the digital age with green screen, and this is where our video ends.
So we've come a long way, haven't we? From Dr. No to Octopussy at best. And despite all of the history, projections are still being used to this day. Apparently front projections were used in Spectre, but of course technology has advanced and the footage is no longer 240p. Now the distinction between projection, green screen and reality has become more and more unclear, and will continue to do so as time goes by. With that being said, I'm out of here.